"Please stop being so perfect," the CEO cried. The single dad didn't say a word. They laughed as they handed him the job application. Not out loud. They were too polished for that. But Marcus Holloway caught the glance. The 2-second exchange between Diane Prescott and her associate, Jonah Weil. The kind that said this should be interesting, without requiring any words at all. Diane Prescott was 44, Senior Vice President of Operations at Ashford Capital, and the kind of woman who wore her net worth the way other people wore perfume, invisibly but always present in the room before she was. She had personally hired 23 executives in the last 6 years. Not one of them had arrived to the interview in a 7-year-old Honda Civic with a dinosaur sticker on the back window. Marcus had. He sat down across from her in the conference room on the 32nd floor. Outside, downtown Chicago glittered against a gray November sky. He placed his folder on the table, a plain manila folder, not a leather portfolio, and adjusted the collar of a suit he'd dry cleaned twice this week, because it was the only one he owned. Jonah Weil, Diane's deputy, leaned toward her and murmured something behind his pen. Diane's lips pressed together in a thin approximation of a smile. She looked at Marcus the way someone looks at a restaurant menu when they've already decided to leave. "Mr. Hayes," she said, though his name was Marcus Holloway and he'd submitted his resume under that name, which told him she hadn't read it. "This is an executive-level position. Director of Strategic Finance. The expectations are quite demanding." Marcus nodded, said nothing. "We typically see candidates with backgrounds at firms like McKinsey, Goldman, people who've operated at a certain..." She let the sentence float. "Unfinished. A test." "Level?" Marcus offered, without inflection. "Scale," she corrected. What Diane Prescott didn't know was that Marcus had, 5 years ago, overseen a $2.1 billion restructuring of one of the largest logistics companies in the Midwest. What none of them knew was that by the end of this interview, Jonah would quietly excuse himself from the room, and by Friday, Diane would walk into the CEO's office, not to report on the candidate, but to explain herself. But Marcus just folded his hands on the table and waited. He'd woken that morning at 5:47 a.m., not to an alarm but to the small, warm weight of a 6-year-old crawling into his bed. "Dad." His daughter's voice was sleep-rough. "Is today the day?" "Yeah, bug." He'd pulled her in, her curly hair tickling his chin. "Today's the day." Zoe had fallen back asleep in 3 minutes. Marcus lay there another 12, counting the cracks in the ceiling the way he did every morning, not from despair, but from habit. Ceilings were reliable. They didn't move. In the last 4 years, not much else had stayed still. He'd made breakfast by 6:30, scrambled eggs, slightly overcooked, the way Zoe liked them. He'd packed her bag, folders, library book, the purple thermos she'd chosen herself at Target, the one that had taken them 45 minutes to select, because it needed to have both stars and dinosaurs, and Target had cruelly separated the two concepts into different sections of the store. He dropped her at school at 7:50. She'd turned at the gate, pointed at him with the gravity that only 6-year-olds can marshal, and announced, "You're going to get the job, Dad." Then she'd walked inside without waiting for an answer, because at 6, certainty requires no confirmation. Marcus had sat in the parking lot for 7 minutes. Then he drove to Ashford Capital. The interview had been going for 11 minutes. Diane Prescott had asked him 3 questions, none of them from the posted job description. They were softer questions. Angled questions. The kind designed not to learn what you know, but to learn how you respond to being underestimated. How did you hear about this position? What appeals to you about Ashford specifically? What's your, current situation? Professionally? Marcus answered each one clearly. He didn't elaborate. He didn't perform. He'd been in enough rooms to know when the test was whether you'd oversell, and he had no interest in selling anything. He was here to do a job. If they wanted him to do it, he'd do it. If they didn't, he'd get in the Civic with the dinosaur sticker and find somewhere they would. Jonah Weil had glanced at his phone twice. Not urgently. Dismissively, then the door opened. Patricia Gaines, CEO of Ashford Capital, stepped in with an apology on her face. "Diane, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to personally." She stopped. She looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her. Something happened in Patricia Gaines's face that Diane Prescott would later describe in the HR investigation debrief as a complete rearrangement of expression. "Marcus," Patricia said. Not a question. "Patricia," he stood. They shook hands. Longer than a business handshake, the kind that contains history. Diane's smile locked in place. Jonah's phone disappeared into his pocket. "You know each other?" Diane asked. Patricia's eyes moved from Marcus to Diane slowly, reading the room, reading the tone, reading 11 minutes of interview she hadn't witnessed, but could reconstruct entirely from the manila folder on the table and the look on her senior VP's face. "We do," Patricia said. Her voice was careful. "Even, Marcus was my mentor at Caldwell Group. Before my promotion. Before Ashford. Before," she paused. "Most things." Jonah made a noise in his throat and excused himself. Diane said nothing. "I should have flagged it," Patricia told Marcus when they were alone in the hallway, Diane having followed Jonah under the pretense of a meeting. "When your resume came through, I recognized the name. I wanted you to go through the standard process. I didn't want to. It's fine," Marcus said. She studied him. "You've been doing this for 4 years. Yes, single. Yes, interviewing for director-level jobs in Midwestern companies when you could walk into a partner track position at 3 different firms in New York with 1 phone call." He said nothing. She looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" "Chicago's where Zoe is," he said. "Her grandparents, her school, her friends." He glanced out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city below. "Her mother's buried here." Patricia Gaines had been CEO of Ashford Capital for 9 years. She had sat across from some of the most formidable people in American finance. She had held her own in rooms where she was the youngest person present, the only woman present, the only black woman present. Sometimes all 3 at once. She had not cried in a professional context since 2009. What Marcus didn't know was that Patricia had started this morning at 4:30 a.m. reviewing the restructuring plan for Ashford's most troubled subsidiary, the same plan that 3 external consultants had failed to crack in 8 months. She'd opened his resume on a whim. Read it twice. Come down to the 32nd floor personally. She'd find out soon enough what she already suspected. They all would. Diane Prescott had not gotten to Senior Vice President of Operations at a firm like Ashford by being careless. She was precise. She was thorough. She managed 32 direct reports and ran quarterly performance reviews that other executives had described, privately, as an experience. She wore St. John suits and remembered everyone's middle name. She also had, for the last 11 minutes, been asking a man she dismissed as unqualified to explain his professional appeal to a company he was in fact overqualified to serve. She discovered this at 11:14 a.m. while searching her own database, the one she maintained personally, because she trusted no system more than herself, and finding the file Angela Marsh, her assistant, had forwarded 40 minutes ago with the subject line, FYI re 11 a.m. candidate. Diane hadn't opened it before the interview. She opened it now. Marcus Holloway. former partner, Caldwell Group Strategic Finance, led 2.1B Caldwell Northgate Consolidation, winner CFO Magazine 40 Under 40 2018, took voluntary leave 2020, reason on file, family circumstances. She scrolled. One daughter, age 6. Wife, Catherine Holloway, née Abrams. Deceased, 2020, cause, glioblastoma. Diane sat very still for a moment. Then she stood up and walked to Patricia's office. Marcus was in the lobby when his phone buzzed. He expected Zoe's school. They called at unexpected times, usually about snacks. Instead, it was a number he hadn't seen in 4 years. Tom Caldwell. Former managing partner. He stared at it, let it ring twice, then picked up. Marcus. Tom's voice was the same, unhurried, the specific frequency of a man who had never once been rushed by anyone. I heard you were in town. Someone mentioned you'd been applying around. I want you to know, if Ashford doesn't work out, I have something for you. Different scope. You'd need to relocate. Marcus was quiet. The offer would be Tom named a number. Marcus looked out through the lobby's glass front at the street below, at the November trees, at a woman walking a very fat dog with tremendous dignity. He thought about Zoe at her gate this morning, pointing at him. "You're going to get the job, Dad. I'll call you back," he said. He hung up. Upstairs, Diane Prescott had been in Patricia's office for 4 minutes. She had not sat down. "He's been interviewing at this level for 4 years, Patricia said. Her voice was flat, not angry. Something quieter than anger. "And you ran a standard interview." "I didn't know. His file was sent at 10:23. Silence. Diane. Patricia turned her chair to face the window. "Do you know what it takes to leave a partner-track career at Caldwell Group? To take 4 years below your level, in your own city, so your daughter doesn't lose her home and her school and her grandmother in the same year she loses her mother?" More silence. "I know it's not your job to know his story," Patricia continued, "but it is your job to read a resume." She paused. "And it was your job not to hand it to Jonah as a punchline." Diane hadn't known Jonah's whispered comment had been audible from the doorway. She knew now. Whatever she'd expected from this morning, it hadn't been this. And from the expression on Patricia Gaines's face, the conversation was not close to finished. Marcus was offered the position at 12:47 p.m. Not by Diane Prescott, by Patricia Gaines, who called his cell phone while he was eating a turkey sandwich in his Civic in the parking garage because he'd skipped breakfast except for the scrambled eggs he'd watched Zoe eat and never actually gotten around to himself. "The role is yours if you want it," Patricia said. "Director of Strategic Finance, full scope, full authority. I'm also asking you to consult on the Hartwell subsidiary restructuring. 6 months. Your terms." Marcus finished chewing, looked at the dinosaur sticker on his dashboard. Zoe had chosen it at age 4, and he had not had the heart to remove it, and at some point it had stopped occurring to him that he should. "I'll take it," he said. "Good." A pause. "I owe you an apology on behalf of how this morning began." "You don't," he said, "but I appreciate it." Marcus. Her voice shifted into something different. Less CEO, more the person who'd sat across from him at a small table in Caldwell's Chicago office 12 years ago, 26 years old and terrified and trying not to show it. "How are you?" Actually, he thought about it, the real answer and the acceptable answer. "We're okay," he said finally. "Zoe's good. She's..." Something moved in his chest. "She's so good. She just is. I don't know where she gets it." "I do," Patricia said. What Marcus didn't know was that upstairs, in the 32nd floor conference room, Diane Prescott was sitting alone with the files Angela had forwarded, and the cold residue of 11 minutes she couldn't take back. And that Jonah Weil, who had also received the forwarded file and also hadn't read it, was currently in HR having a conversation he hadn't anticipated. He picked Zoe up at 3:45. She was the last one out, as usual, delayed by a conversation she was having with her teacher about the relative merits of 3 different dinosaur species, a conversation that had apparently required visual aids. She emerged from the school door, holding a drawing of a triceratops with what she described as accurate spikes. "Dad," she said, before she'd even reached the car, "did you get it?" "I got it." She stopped walking, looked at him, then screamed, a pure, uncomplicated scream of joy that made 3 nearby parents turn in alarm. Zoe, sorry. She wasn't. She ran the last 10 feet and threw herself into him, and he caught her the way he always did, the way he always would. Her weight familiar and specific and entirely irreplaceable. "I told you," she said into his shoulder. "I told you." "You did," he agreed. She pulled back and examined his face with the thoroughness of a 6-year-old who has learned to read adults as a survival skill. "Were they nice to you?" He thought about Diane's 11 minutes, about Jonah's phone, about the manila folder on the table, and the suit he dry-cleaned twice. "Some of them," he said. Yeah, that night, after Zoe was asleep, she'd insisted on a celebration dinner of chicken nuggets and then fallen unconscious mid-sentence on the couch. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and his phone. He'd missed 4 calls. Tom Caldwell again. His sister, his mother-in-law, who called every Tuesday and sometimes Fridays for no announced reason except the real one, which was Zoe, and the fact that Zoe was all she had left of Catherine. He called his mother-in-law back first. She screamed in the parking lot, he told her. Ellen laughed, a real laugh. The kind she'd gotten quieter about in the last 4 years and was slowly getting louder about again. "That sounds about right. She said she told me so. She did tell you so. She's been telling you so for a week." He smiled at nothing. The kitchen. The dinosaur magnets on the fridge. The small purple thermos drying on the rack. "He's doing this for Zoe," Patricia Gaines would say the next morning, in a meeting Marcus wasn't present for, to a room of senior staff that included Diane Prescott. He left everything to stay in Chicago for his daughter. And we almost turned him away in 11 minutes because Jonah didn't recognize his name and Diane didn't read the file. The room was quiet. "That ends now," Patricia said. "With every candidate, at every level. We read the file. We see the person. That's how we do this." Diane Prescott did not speak, but something in her face shifted, not defensively, not reflexively. Something that looked, to the person sitting beside her, like the beginning of actually being ashamed. He started at Ashford the 2nd Monday of December. His office was on the 31st floor, one below Patricia's, one above operations. It had windows on 2 sides. He set up his desk with methodical efficiency, laptop, notebook. A small framed photo of Zoe from last summer, grinning in a sprinkler, hair everywhere. The Triceratops drawing, the one with the accurate spikes, he taped to the inside of his desk drawer, where only he would see it. Angela Marsh, who had sent the forwarded file, brought him a coffee at 9:14 and said, in the quiet, factual tone of someone delivering necessary intelligence, "Jonah Weil is no longer with the company. Effective Friday." She set the coffee down. "Just so you know." Marcus looked up. "I didn't ask for that," he said. "I know." She met his eyes. "He laughed during your interview. We all heard it." He was quiet for a moment. "What's in the Hartwell file?" he asked. She handed it to him. He opened it. Read for 45 minutes without stopping. Made 3 pages of notes, then picked up the phone and called the subsidiary's CFO, who had been trying to reach someone at Ashford's parent company for 6 months, and had stopped expecting anyone to call him back. By noon, he had a working thesis on the Hartwell structure. By 2, he had a preliminary model. By 4, he was presenting it to Patricia Gaines in her office, and Patricia was looking at him the way she had at 11 a.m. In the 32nd floor hallway, except different now, less surprised, more confirmed. 3 external consultants, she said, when he finished. I know. 8 months. I know. You've been here 5 hours. He shrugged, not dismissively, not smugly, just the shrug of a man who had, for the last 4 years, been applying his full capacity to dry cleaning one suit and making non-slimy scrambled eggs and packing purple thermoses, and had simply not had anywhere to put the rest of it. I had a lot of time to think, he said. Evenings, mostly after Zoe's asleep. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and her voice was not quite CEO anymore, and not quite the 26-year-old from Caldwell's Chicago office, but something in between. Something honest, Marcus. I need to say something. Okay, I've been running this company for 9 years. I have watched some of the sharpest people I know take leave, medical, family, personal, and come back diminished. Not their fault. It's what leave does. The muscle atrophies. He waited. You didn't atrophy, she said. You went somewhere else with it, somewhere quieter. And she stopped. He looked at her. You're sitting here, she said, with a 6-year-old's drawing in your desk drawer and a 4-year-old suit and a model that 3 consultants couldn't build, and you're not. Her voice broke. Just slightly. Just once. You're not asking for anything. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just... She stopped again. He didn't say a word. She looked away. Out the window. The city below, gray and enormous and indifferent in the way cities are, holding everything equally without valuing it. Please stop being so perfect, she said. And then she laughed, a sound she hadn't expected that surprised her, and put her hand over her face for a moment. Marcus looked at his hands, waited while she recovered. He'd learned, in 4 years of being the only adult in the room when things got hard, that sometimes the most decent thing you could do for someone was let them have their moment without filling it. Sorry, Patricia said. She dropped her hand. Her face was composed again. Mostly. Don't be, he said. He called Zoe from his car at 5:48. How was day 1? She asked. She was at Ellen's. Tuesday was Ellen's day. Pretty good, he said. I think I'm going to like it. Did you make friends? He thought about Patricia laughing behind her hand at the end of a day that had started with him sitting in a parking garage eating a dry turkey sandwich. 1, maybe. 1 is enough to start, Zoe said with the authority of a child who had recently moved classrooms and knew something about this. He smiled. It is. Dad? Yeah, I'm proud of you. He sat in the parking garage for a moment. Engine on. Heat running. Chicago in December rattling faintly against the concrete above him. I know, Bug, he said. What Marcus didn't know was that across town, in the Ashford Capital boardroom, Patricia Gaines was concluding a conversation with the 3 board members who oversaw executive hiring. She had presented the Hartwell preliminary model. She had explained the timeline. 5 hours, first day, 1 hire. She had answered their questions clearly and without drama. She had also recommended, formally and in writing, that the director-level interview process be overhauled, that all candidate files be reviewed before first meetings. That implicit bias training be required for all hiring managers. That a third-party audit be conducted on the last 5 years of executive hires. What prompted this? The board chair had asked. Patricia had answered simply, someone who didn't complain. The board chair had sat with that for a moment. Then, written something down. By Friday, Diane Prescott would receive a formal letter of inquiry from HR. Not termination, not yet, but a review. She would spend the weekend going over 11 minutes she could not stop replaying. She would draft an apology to Marcus twice and delete it twice. Because she didn't know what you say to someone you tried to dismiss, and who responded by solving in a single afternoon what 3 people couldn't solve in 8 months, and who has never once made you feel the weight of it. On Monday, she would send it anyway. Marcus would read it on his lunch break, with Zoe's triceratops drawing visible in the open desk drawer. He would think about it for a while. Then he would respond. 2 sentences, 2 lines. No drama, I appreciate this. Let's move forward. Some people, once corrected, correct themselves. That's worth something. 3 months later, Marcus woke at 6:02, not to a wait in his bed but to his alarm, because Zoe had, in the last few weeks, started sleeping through until 7. He wasn't sure when that had happened. He'd missed the transition, the way you miss all the important ones, gradually, then all at once, then looking back and trying to place the exact moment. He made coffee, looked at the kitchen, the dinosaur magnets, the purple thermos clean on the rack, a new pair of shoes by the door, Zoe's, pink with stars, bought because she'd needed them, and he'd been able to get them without calculating whether they'd affect the following week. He sat at the table. Outside, Chicago in February. Gray and cold and brutally itself. He thought about Catherine. He did this every morning, briefly, the way you touch a familiar scar, not to feel pain but to confirm it's yours, that it happened, that it was real. She would have thought Zoe's parking lot scream was the funniest thing that had ever occurred. She would have wanted to know every detail of the 11 minutes with Diane Prescott, and she would have had opinions about all of it, delivered in the quick, precise way she'd had, not sparing but not cruel either. She would have been exactly right about most of it. He missed her in the way he'd learned to miss her, wholly and without drowning. He heard Zoe's feet on the stairs, the specific rhythm of her, the pattern he'd know anywhere. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, the ones with the planets, holding her hair out of her face with one hand and examining him with morning suspicion. "You're smiling," she said. "Am I? You're doing the smiling at nothing thing." "I'm smiling at you," he said. She dropped her hand, walked to the table, pulled out her chair with the gravity of a very small person conducting a very important meeting, and sat down. "Tell me," she said. So he did. He told her about the office on the 31st floor with the 2-sided windows, about the Hartwell model and Patricia's face when he'd presented it. He left out Diane's 11 minutes, not because Zoe couldn't handle it, but because it wasn't the part that mattered. About Angela bringing coffee and saying, "Just so you know," about the phone call from Tom Caldwell, the one he still hadn't returned, the one that had become, in the intervening months, less urgent and more clearly unnecessary. About how, sometimes, the right room is the one in the right city, even if it takes a little while to open the door. Zoe listened with her chin in her hands, serious, the way she was when something mattered. "Good," she said when he finished. "Yeah," he agreed. "Good." She reached across the table and patted his hand once, a gesture she'd developed recently, borrowed from Ellen, who borrowed it from Catherine, the long, quiet chain of women in his daughter's life handing something forward. Then she stood up and went to get her cereal. Outside, the city. Inside, warm, a Tuesday in February. Nothing extraordinary about it. Just a father and his daughter, and a dinosaur on the fridge, and a morning that had arrived without disaster, which is its own kind of grace. The kind you stop noticing until you start noticing again. Until you realize you've been holding your breath for 4 years, and somewhere in the last 3 months you've been breathing. Actually breathing. The way people do when they've finally, quietly, landed somewhere safe. Some things don't announce themselves. They just become true. And one morning you're sitting in your kitchen in Chicago in February with your daughter's hand on yours, and you think, this. Not a penthouse. Not a vindication. Not a Forbes profile or a partner track or a number Tom Caldwell named in a parking garage. Just this. It was enough. It was more than. Jonah Weil left Ashford Capital in December. He declined to comment. Diane Prescott completed the HR review process. She retained her position. She is, by several accounts, a different kind of manager than she was in November. Some people earn second chances. Some people use them. The Hartwell subsidiary restructuring was completed in 5 months, 3 months ahead of schedule. The model Marcus built on his first afternoon became the basis for the final plan. Patricia presented it to the board in April. She didn't explain where it had come from. She didn't need to. Zoe turned 7 in March. She wanted a dinosaur cake. She got a dinosaur cake. There were accurate spikes.